The truth has finally leaked as a Pittsburgh Penguins insider has revealed the plan for both Rickard, Rakell, and Bryan Rust heading into the future and this new season as Kyle Dubas continues to rebuild the Pittsburgh Penguins. We're going to break down this new report and some other shocking details in this episode of Penguins Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 68% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the Pittsburgh Penguins, go down below, hit that free subscribe button, because this is the place to be for all your daily Pittsburgh Penguins content. But Nick, things are starting to move. We're getting some new information around the league, not just with the Pittsburgh Penguins in August as we head towards the preseason. And we get another update on what's going to happen in the future with the Pittsburgh Penguins for both Bryan Rust and Rickard Rakell, because there's been a cloud hanging over their heads at this point. Will both of them go? Will one of them go? Are they even going to get traded? Well, we have a little bit of clarity now, and this is from Josh Yo, of course, and he says that on Rust and Rakell, are they even on this team when October 7th, the first day of the season, rolls around? I'm not so sure they will be. That's insane in of itself. We're going to get into that. And he goes on to say, I think there's a real chance at least one of them is gone before then. Now, we'll break down this initial report and what you think on this first. Obviously, there was another report on that, what the return is. We'll get to that in a second in terms of what Kyle Dubas is looking for these players. And it's a little bit shocking, actually, to me. But, Josh is saying here, it looks like both of them could be gone. At least one of them is going to be gone. And that's before the season. So, Nick, what do you make of that? Because that's going to happen this month. It's going to happen in the next 3 weeks. And, I think there's a real chance that one of them is traded. I have my choice of who I think it should be, but what do you think of this report?
To be honest, I think there's been a lot of reports over the last few weeks. Darius, we heard all offseason that there's going to be fireworks. I feel like they say that every year just to keep us interested. There hasn't been any fireworks at all this offseason. But I think people might get a little bit antsy getting closer to the preseason. They're looking at holes in their roster that they haven't been able to fill yet. There's been a lot of reports that half the league wants top six forwards. Yep. And what are Rickard, Rakell, and Bryan Rust, Darius? They are top six forwards. So it makes sense that they'll be on their way out very, very, very soon. Obviously, Bryan Rust had 65 points in 71 games, almost a point a game player. At age 33, he's still playing very well for his age. A little bit older, but still putting up really good production. Rickard Rakell, on the other hand, 70 points last year, arguably his best season, and 81 games. And well, surprisingly, again, we've said this all season, not traded, or all offseason, not traded at the trade deadline. Also, he's 32 years old, so they're pretty close in age. But two very good players. I think someone that could be moved first is a guy like Bryan Rust, just because I feel like a team in the Western Conference might want the Stanley Cup pedigree. Obviously, Rickard Rakell doesn't have that. Bryan Rust did win the cups with Pittsburgh. Obviously he was, a way younger player than that. Was almost 9 years ago, which is crazy to say out loud. Maybe, even I feel a little bit older saying that, but I think, Bryan Rust to me seems like the guy who teams are going to be looking for, especially if they're trying to get over that, push them over the finish line in terms of getting to that Stanley Cup finals or playoffs, whatever that milestone they want to hit is, because he has a Stanley Cup pedigree. He's a veteran in the league. He's played with Sidney Crosby basically his whole career, so he knows how to play with super skilled, all-time elite players. A team I thought about a lot for Bryan Rust was the Edmonton Oilers. I don't know if they can make that work cap-wise. Even a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs, who, have some cap space, really need a top six forward. If you do look at their lines, they need someone. And they have elite centers that Bryan Rust would be used to playing with. So for me, Bryan Rust is a guy that could be moved first. I think he might have more suitors, just because, outside of the point production, which to me is similar enough between the two players, he has that Stanley Cup pedigree. The intangibles are more there for a guy like Rust outside of a Rickard Rakell. And, underrated aspect of this, which I might add, Darius, Bryan Rust is probably not going to play at the Olympics, and Rickard Rakell probably will. So there is some stuff that, he'll get that break, maybe be rejuvenated. Rickard Rakell won't have that this season if you're looking in the short term. And if he's not traded, the Olympics are, Kyle Dubas has gone on record saying he's using the Olympics to look at all his players, reevaluate things. And Bryan Rust for all my money, won't be there. He probably wasn't even on that initial 60-man roster or however big that roster was announced. So that's a big thing for me. Rickard Rakell's gonna be in Italy, probably playing for Team Sweden. So, Bryan Rust to me seems like a guy that might be moved first just because there's so much going on outside of just, his play on the ice. His Stanley Cup pedigree, his intangibles, his ability to play with good players. His contract's not even that bad with the cap right. So for me, I think Bryan Rust will be moved first.
And we'll definitely get into their contracts as well. And that's what makes them so attractive that, you don't have to free up that much salary cap space if you are right up against it like the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I think both players fit very well. But in terms of who I think they should trade, I mean, you bring up some great points, and those are all the points why I think they should be keeping Bryan Rust, because they want to instill that culture with some of the younger guys, or you don't want to trade. We're seeing with the Chicago Blackhawks, you can't just go scorched earth and expect it to work. Like, you still need some good players there and a culture established there. So I think that's the reason they should hang on to him. And when you look at Rickard Rakell too, it was a career year for him last year, 70 points in 81 games. Like, that is great value for $5 million. So I think that this is the guy you should be looking at trading. He can help a team. I understand, and I do believe and agree with you that, Bryan Rust has that Stanley Cup pedigree and he brings different intangibles to the table, and that's why he might actually be worth a little bit more. But to me, Rickard Rakell is the guy you look at trading. And in terms of trading them, the second part of this as well from Josh, he went on to say, I wonder what you can get in return. And Kyle Dubas wants NHL-ready players more than anything, which I thought was interesting and also kind of makes sense because, again, you can't just go scorched earth and expect all these prospects to just show up in 3 years and your team's going to be great. It's just not going to work that way. We saw that with, Lemieux stuck around to play with Sidney Crosby for a year, right? So I feel like Crosby and some of those other guys want to, pay it back in the future with some of the younger Penguins as well. But nonetheless, they're looking for like a 22-year-old guy. Again, not exactly that, but, a guy that's been in the league maybe for 2 years or something at this point and that can play right now. I think that's very interesting as well, because that really limits your options, I think, in terms of trades. But at the same time, and I wanted to bring this up, when you look at their contracts and their cap hits, these are very attractive contracts. $5 million for a guy that scores 70 points. He's locked up for 3 more years. And the salary cap is rising. I think that's great value. Same with Bryan Rust. I mean, interchangeable $100,000, right? They make about the same. So what do you make of that? We have no idea who's coming back the other way, but we do know that I think Kyle Dubas right now, while I think it's the correct route to go in terms of return for these two players, you might be limiting your options for 2 guys that I think a lot of teams want.
No, Darius, I agree with you 100%. I think it's very interesting to look at these 22-year-old guys. But I think you made a great point about not going scorched earth. Chicago Blackhawks was a great example you brought up. But you also did say they should keep Bryan Rust because of his intangibles. They have Sidney Crosby and Kris Letang, so I think they'll be okay. Yeah. But you do bring up a good point from that end, obviously. But again, the Penguins have a lot of cap space to work with. They have a ton of assets that teams are going to want. So Kyle Dubas does have a lot of work ahead of him. And I think I don't know how many good teams have 22-year-old NHL-ready forwards playing for them. Is my thing, because looking around the league at the main suitors, the best teams in the NHL that are in the Cup Finals, that are in the Final Four, or even make the playoffs, a lot of them just have a lot of strong, established NHLers that aren't on the cusp or have been, young players in the league. Like, there's no one on Edmonton that I can think of right now. In Florida, I'm thinking of like Samoskevich, who's like young, who's like a player maybe they would look for in return. Even if you look at the Leafs, there's not really anyone. Matthew Nyes is not being traded for these guys. I'm looking like even if the Rangers make it back, or the Carolina Hurricanes, like none of these. There's not a lot of teams that are really good who are buying have 22-year-old NHL ready forwards that they're gonna want to trade, because you know why? 22-year-old NHL ready forwards don't make a lot of money. So I don't understand why you would trade them for a Bryan Rust or Rickard Rakell, because you want to extend that window. Unless you think it's the answer, to winning the Stanley Cup, I could see, that justification. But for me, it doesn't make sense. I think Dubas has already done a good job of getting players back of that age group. Like the Jake Gensel trade, he brought back players that are playing right now. Even bringing a guy like Philip Tomasino, who I don't know how well he's going to play next year, but he was a younger guy they brought in. Trade obviously Rutger McGrody, they traded Braden Yeager, but he was more NHL ready. He's done a lot of that already. I know they already have a lot of draft picks. For me, I think Dubas could be making a mistake by trying to, put himself in a box of what the return is going to be. Just get the best you can, whether it's draft picks. Maybe you can flip a draft pick for a disgruntled young player. We've seen that happen with guys like Yaroslav Askarov or even a Niels Lundqvist over the past couple years. You could do that if you have an extra first. I wouldn't look at this if I was Dubas as a in and out transaction. You're gonna want to take these assets and do more things with them. He always does do that as well. So for me, I think the 22-year-old thing is a little bit, putting him in a box. But Darius, I'm curious if you think that's the only way they should look at it, or they should maybe look at more deeper past just what the return is going to be for Rust or Raquel, when they can do with it. Because in my opinion, I don't even understand getting 23, 22-year-olds because Sidney Crosby's already 38 or whatever. Malkin's leaving the team next year. Letang's old. Karlsson's going to leave. You might even want to get younger than that, or guys who are going to be in Wilkes-Barre. I think it's a little bit confusing from my opinion. But I think Dubas might be looking at it just from his time, his trade history in Toronto, even some trades he's already made in Pittsburgh. I think from that point of view, it will be interesting to see what he does with the returns.
Yeah, I think that, when you're looking at acquiring a 22, 23-year-old forward that can make an impact in the NHL right now, not too many teams, like look at Mason McTavish. He might be up for grabs right now. The Anaheim Ducks don't want Rickard, Rakell, and Bryan Rust. It doesn't match up to their timeline, right? Like kind of like you were alluding to. So that doesn't make sense. So Kyle Dubas, I think, and he loves to make these trades, just like you said as well, that I think it's going to be like a 3 or 4 step trade where he's going to make a trade where Bryan Rust or Rickard Rakell go out the door and you get maybe, a couple draft picks back, like assets in that way. And then you flip those assets to go out and get like a player that you want. I think that's fine. And I think that's the only way this actually does make sense, because for what you want back, there's no team that wants those 2 players that has that on their roster. I just don't think it exists, or that they can trade them away. It just doesn't exist. So I feel like it's going to be a multi-step trade here where there's a lot of moving parts, and I think that's okay. And Kyle Dubas, we've seen it before, loves those trades, especially around the draft. So we'll see what he ends up doing. But we want to hear what you have to say in the comments about this new report. Sounds like one of, if not both of them, will be traded, which is kind of interesting because it takes all the pressure off of Erik Karlsson all of a sudden. What's happening with him? So, looks like one of them, if not both of them, will be traded. Let us know in the comments if you want them to trade them, which one you want them to trade, and the fact that, the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be making some moves. It's going to be very interesting. Let us know how you feel in the comments, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything Pittsburgh Penguins.